Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Rosefellow Podcast. With me today, I have my business partner, best friend, Sam Tsoumas. Thank you again for being with us. And we have two special guests today. We have Dan Delmar and Mike Newton from the Inspiring Entrepreneurs Podcast, where they interview hundreds of Canada's top business minds. Mike, Dan, thank you so much for being with us. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, if you don't mind.
Thanks for having us. You want to begin?
Sure. You'll never get the microphone back. So let's see. So by trade, I'm a CPA, so I don't brag about it most of the time. Reality is I've been in the profession since 1989. I was managing partner of FL Fuller Landau from 2004 until we merged with BDO Canada in 2023, so 19 years. And one of the things, we were always, the mid-sized firm and always looking to try and take advantage. So to feed into the Inspiring Entrepreneurs Podcast, I mean, we go back to, the Great Recession that kicked in 2007, 2008. We were looking for an opportunity to get onto the market. We worked something out with CGAD at the time, who was probably hurting like everybody else was for getting somebody on airtime, and thus began. One of my partners at the time, Josh Miller, always wanted to have a radio show. So we let him be the voice, and him and Dan hit it off pretty much from the beginning. So that's the inspiring entrepreneur side of things. So plug.
I was a journalist, political journalist and columnist for many years in Montreal, covered municipal politics, federal, national, most elections for over the course of 20 years. And when Mike and I met, I was the evening host at CJAD. And in the first hour, they would sell those hours to various entrepreneurs. So I had a few of these shows going in various industries. One with Mike, one was a mortgage thing, an insurance thing. And after a while, I didn't want to keep any of them. I kept this one with Mike and Inspiring Entrepreneurs. At the time, it was called Today's Entrepreneur. And we grew the show. It kept going for 15 years to the point where during the pandemic, my company, TNKR Media, took over the production of it remotely. Put out all these emergency episodes for resources for entrepreneurs. And since then, we've been slowly kind of taking over more aspects of the production. And in January, it's going to be more than a radio show, but a full-fledged podcast. And we're going to go, we're going to make a bit of a pivot nationally and talk about some important national issues and how to accelerate Canadian business really at a time that's really important for us.
I really appreciate you both being here because there's a lot of people out there who are not sure. We call it young entrepreneurs coming out of school thinking, what should they do? What character traits do they need? How do they look at business? And you both having the opportunity to have met so many incredible entrepreneurs, I'm sure there's going to be a great takeaway from this. On that note, what are some of the similar characteristics that you've noticed in many of these entrepreneurs who've taken that leap of faith to go from a kind of a stable job and decide to go all in on a new business or whatever it may be?
So I can go back 15, 20 years in a thought process, and it's only been supported and revitalized in the conversations with our guests. As I always said, that the three things you needed to be a successful entrepreneur were passion, execution, and the sense of mindfulness in terms of, whether it's emotional intelligence or, your place in the room and what effect you have on the people around you. Those have always been, to me, my key elements of success. And over the years, I split my time between a client base as well as running a firm. So I always considered myself an entrepreneur from that side. And watching the successful clients over the years, those were the traits that came into play. And it's hammered home on a regular basis with our entrepreneurs that it's passion, it's execution, which, coming from a CPA is not something that you're used to hearing. Execution is not something that, CPAs are generally strong on. And certainly this, how do you affect the people around you? And how do you not talk to everybody the exact same way when you're talking to somebody, right? It's know your audience.
So those were the traits. What about any patterns that you've noticed on any successful entrepreneurs?
Quirky, a little crazy, certainly. I'm an entrepreneur. You guys are. There's a little edge there, a tolerance for risk, bold, innovative ideas. And one thing that's always come back to me over the years from various entrepreneurs was how discouraging some other people have been of their ideas, and they say, "Nope, I'm doing it my way," and they plow through. So a bit of contrarianism, I think, also in there as well, which is nice for me to learn about as a journalist and as a commentator. Sometimes you say controversial things, you don't know if you're on the right track or whatnot, but being an entrepreneur, you have to have the confidence to know what your track is.
That reminds me, Sam, when we when we had the idea to start up our first real estate industrial specific fund in Canada, we were not even a year in business. And we said, okay, let's call the professionals. Let's call those who put funds together. Let's call our attorneys. Let's call consultants. Let's get their opinion. And the feedback was, guys, you've been in business for not even a year. Wait, build a track record, develop some more buildings, come see us in 5 years, and then we can talk about it. And that's where we said, to your point, excuse the term, fuck it. We'll do it on our own. Let's put together a list of investors. Let's call them ourselves. Let's figure it out. And it paid off.
It's interesting because, Sam, I keep looking over at you, and your hat basically sums it up.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but that's, from an entrepreneurial perspective, that's it.
Yep.
You cannot follow status quo. You need to be prepared to be bold. You need to be prepared to be mocked. You need to be prepared to fail. I mean, and not every entrepreneur is going to fail, is going to succeed right out of the box. There's going to be failure. It's not whether you get knocked down, right? The little expression goes, it's whether you get back up, right? And I think from an entrepreneurial standpoint, that couldn't be truer.
Well, we had you guys on our season premiere because we were hearing stuff in real estate, and we were like, these guys are rising really quickly. It doesn't make sense. And then we see that you're building the buildings, real stuff is happening. So how discouraging was it when people were saying, no, guys, pump the brakes a little bit, you're going too crazy?
On my end, we were almost considered the underdogs at every stage. At first, when we left our previous employment, oh, guys, good luck to you. We opened our office. Oh, that's cute. Good luck to you. Let's see if you could get, some partners. Oh, we got some partners. Oh, good luck to you. Let's see if you can build a building. Oh, that's nice. You built your first building. Let's see how many you can build. It was like at almost every level we would hear, chatter about everybody just saying negative things.
It's hard to get people on the bandwagon, right? At the beginning, to follow into what you're doing, thinking, professing at the end of the day, and then all of a sudden you hit a point and they knew you were going to succeed all along.
Yes.
And it's, by the way, those that go that route, to me, are not entrepreneurs. Those that are going to question, and then jump on the bandwagon with you are followers. And it's the old 10-80-10 curve at the end of the day, right? Is 10% of people are going to be way ahead. They're going to see things. They're going to experience things. They're going to be early adopters. You got 10% at the end you want to just keep out of the way. And the other 80 you just want to shift with you as you move forward. And that's no different to naysayers along the way.
Curious about it. Is age a factor? I always wondered, is entrepreneurship a young man's game, or do you see it not being? You see some people just wake up, in their 30s or 40s and say, let's do it now.
Wow, good question. We've had entrepreneurs on the show. We had some in their 20s that were really taken off and that were doing well. And one guy started at 12, 13 years old doing construction, poolside jobs, stuff like that, and now has a big company. I don't want to make definitive statements like people can't be an entrepreneur later in their career. That's not, you can do anything you want if you apply yourself to it. But entrepreneurs have a lot of qualities early in life, I think, that set them up for success and set them up for a certain risk tolerance. I was a busboy and selling lemonade and whatever was necessary as a teenager, and that I think instilled some drive in me. And just having a 9-to-5 was not going to be an option for me. Other people prefer 9-to-5, and that's totally fine too. There's no judgment, but I do think that you have to have a certain amount of personal qualities to be able to tolerate the risk, to be able to be made fun of, to be able to withstand criticism, and it's just not for everyone.
No, I totally agree. It's a little bit like leadership, right? At the end of the day, I think the old argument: are you born with leadership skills, or are they honed over? I think if you are born with them, they're definitely honed. But and same thing from an entrepreneurial side is that ability to tolerate things has to be in your DNA somewhere. You just have to have something that allows you to see things differently. Now, it may come out at 13 or 28. Right? It doesn't necessarily, but I think, for those people that are more shy, more meek, a little more introverted, sometimes it comes out a little bit later because there's a lack of confidence. But I think that skill or that drive is always going to exist in you. And, I look back at myself and, as a kid, contrary to what most people think, I'm a complete introvert. And, I prefer to sit on the couch with the dog and watch TV than to be out at a networking event. But that doesn't get me anywhere. So you learn to play the game and do what you have to do. And then I look back and I say, well, I was always the captain of the hockey team or the baseball team, even though that wasn't, the end of the world. I guess there was something there, even though I was quiet. And then you look at it and say, well, I grew up on a farm, so I was selling eggs or I was selling chickens. So there's a little bit of that entrepreneurial spirit that's always in there. So I do believe, same as Dan, I think ultimately at the end of the day, it's something we hone over time, but you got to have a little bit of DNA in there to begin with.
I agree. There's for myself, I think there's two things that stand out. One, watching my dad, who basically came here, sweep floors, worked his way up into the company, ended up buying out the partner and owned the company on his own and being that entrepreneur, similar to Sam, who was in the restaurant business. His father had several restaurants. And then two, what triggered we'll call it the launch to go off on my own, was having a best friend that I can talk to and say, this is something I want to do. And for him to push me and for me to push him to say, it's time. Let's do it. Do we mortgage the houses? Yeah, do it. Mortgage yours, I'll mortgage mine, and vice versa. Do we buy this land? I'm not sure. We should do it. It makes sense. Having that business partner that when I had doubt would kind of push me over the finish line, and vice versa. That's what really took me to the next step.
It's funny that you said you're an introvert. It's similar to me. I'd rather be at home watching TV than being out and socializing, but it's part of the job. Like you said, you will get nowhere if you don't do that.
No, you'll learn. I think there's a stage, everybody say, like, when did it kick in? And I said, well, I can't tell you the exact moment, but I can tell you that the moment that my ambition finally exceeded my fear was the moment I changed.
Yep.
And my personality. I spent the first 5 years at Fuller Landau, and the guy I used to work for used to joke, basically in French, say, Mike used to hide under the carpet for 5 years. We didn't actually know he talked. And now they can't shut me up. Well, at a certain point in time, the ambition was there, the drive was there, the will to succeed was there, and you go, you know what, I can either live and go, I could have, I should have, I would have, or I'm going to say, take it and run with it. And I think it really is. You have to look deep into yourself and go, what's a bigger drive, your ambition or your fear? And the moment that takes over, I think you have an answer as to how to proceed.
And I think for myself, the events in my life that I'm most proud of are those that were the scariest.
Oh,
there's conferences I've done that people said, wow, you're a natural on stage. My mom had to send me to drama class when I was a kid because I was such an introvert. I was so shy. I couldn't talk. Those moments scare me today. I still get on stage and speak and I feel like throwing up beforehand. But it's those moments that I remember and I'm most proud of. Just like when we started Rosefellow, same thing. It's like, should we risk it all? We have a very comfortable job. But that today, looking back, thank God I did.
So how I get away from it? Is only talk on a subject that I know well and don't prepare.
Oh, wow. Complete opposite.
The preparation makes me more anxious and more nervous, and then I get inside my own head and go, I missed that.
Interesting.
As opposed to just letting it flow. You can't do that if you don't know the topic, but for you, if you're talking on your talking, just have 1 or 2, 3, 4 talking points and just roll from there. The more I prep, the more uncomfortable I am.
I'm the opposite. I have to fully prep, memorize exactly what I'm going to say.
I used to be like that.
And even memorize my jokes.
Yep. Oh yeah. No, it's almost like the timing is now for a joke.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't roll off. So it's
So if we're to talk about mindset, innovation, adaptability, we hear a lot about that, the mindset of an entrepreneur. From your multiple conversations with various people, what type of mindset propels entrepreneurs forward in uncertain markets or uncertain times? What do you see to be the common trait there?
Certainly innovation, as we mentioned, desire to be different. I would say in terms of mindset, again, high risk tolerance, having something that is distinguishing themselves from the rest of the market, especially today. Everyone is sort of familiar with the retail landscape and who the players are. It's very easy to look online and see who the players are, but to really stand out, I think you have to be unique and bold, really, at this point. So. Being a little flashy too sometimes.
Yeah, flashy.
Maybe not Rosefellow flashy.
No, we're not that flashy. What's one question you guys love asking that you always seem to, catch the entrepreneurs off guard with?
I don't know if it's catching them off guard. I think it's really trying to find what drives them, right at the end of the day. And I think, if you go back to the question like you just asked, to me, this sense of opportunity in a negative time is what differentiates a lot of people. It's that take that something and make it, take nothing and turn it into something. For some people, there's like, well, why do I want to take a risk at this point? And for other people, it is like, this is where nobody's going. My father always used to tell me, buy when everybody sells and sell when everybody buys, right? So, and that's that opportunity environment.
Lately, I'm obsessed with our pandemic pivot question. So we ask every entrepreneur, how did you change? What was your big pivot moment? And almost all of them have one. And the ones that don't, we're like, oh, maybe it's time to think about what that pivot moment is. But the good ones definitely have one, for sure.
Sam, that reminds me of the Ottawa Real Estate Forum we were at last year. While everybody, all the developers on stage were saying, well, we're putting pen to table, we're going to stop, we're not sure what's going on, the market's changed. And then they asked us, well, what are you guys doing? Are you doing the same? Are you going to wait? And we said, actually, the opposite. We're going all in. We're actually building more on spec. And they couldn't understand why. And it was simple, because the market will turn. It will get better. And if at the time, we started construction. Our buildings are ready now. No one else's were. We ended up doing some of the largest leases in those Ottawa markets and those Montreal markets because our competitors stood on the sidelines and said, we're going to wait. We're going to wait and see. So to your point, you got to go against the herd and sometimes take that risk.
But you also have to have the risk tolerance to accept that this could look ugly for a little while.
You're right.
And I guess the deep pockets don't help either, right, in certain cases. But the reality is you have to be able to ride out that storm.
But pockets are never deep enough.
No, never, no matter what it is.
You still have to believe in it.
Exactly.
For us at Rosefellow, brand awareness is key to attracting not only tenants but also potential investors. How do entrepreneurs you've spoken to build brand stories, or what do they think of to kind of last the test of time and think long term with their businesses? Do you see anything, any traits there, any common?
I think it varies, I would say. Some are in very specific technical fields and almost take a pass at branding and have been very successful with even sort of the most strangely named businesses because they're very specific and very driven in a very particular way. But lately, our most successful entrepreneurs, I think, do have an element of really specialized storytelling. There's podcasts like this. One I would mention is Wealth Simple. They have a full magazine, and they run a magazine and a newsletter with millions of subscribers. So that, to me, is like a really good piece of content that could expand your brand and help it become not just a form of marketing, but a learning opportunity for many people. So adding another level of insight and education, I think, is one way to differentiate your brand. I'm in content marketing, so I'm not objective here, but projects like this, I mean, thought leadership is the only way in many cases to distinguish yourself in a given industry. So that to me is a popular trend now. I think that works.
There was a reason I let you go first. I mean, this is your space. I think brand awareness has changed a lot in the last few decades, right? In terms of what it is that gets you out there. It used to be that advertising, marketing. I believe with all my heart that Dan is 100% right. Is that thought leadership component, that ability to go out on the edge and express yourself and try and lead others and try and help others is, to a certain degree, I guess, feeds the ego, but it's also definitely a selfless act at the other day too. And you got to be real. Right? It's got to be sincere. And I think from a brand's perspective, if you're not sincere in today's world, people see right through it.
One thing I wanted to pick your guys' brain on, because you've invested in this media project, so you believe it creates some value. For me, it's very difficult to convince a lot of people, especially in real estate, who build physical things, that media is also a capital investment.
Yes.
How do you guys push back at people in the industry who say that? What are you doing with this podcast? I mean, you could be making deals in this time.
Well, for myself at least, I remember, because again, I'm the introvert here, so Mike had to sell me on this. But after we were talking about it and actually seen the fruits of our labors on this, what it came down to is very simple. Rosefellow is evidently, we're real estate developers. We're trying to grow our brand across the country, maybe even down south. We'd like to develop a little everywhere. But what do you need? You said it before, deep pockets. Sooner or later, you need investors, you need partners, you need trusted professionals, financial institutions. You can't just go into a market completely blind with nobody having heard you. So if this could, extend our brand awareness to places that we never might have thought of. We go into, I'll give an example, Vancouver one day. We look to invest there, to develop there. Doesn't mean we will, but somebody there's like, oh, I've heard of them. And this is what I think actually is the key to this.
For me, is one of the things that stood out in our business is that it's very archaic when it comes to marketing and branding. You would see a company name, you wouldn't know who the people are behind that. And when Sam and I started Rosefellow, we didn't have investors, we didn't have sites, but we had a good network, and we wanted people to get to know who we were as people, so they could feel comfortable about who they were investing with, who they were bringing a property to, who they were going to rent from. It was really important to create that transparency, and we felt that we can do that with video, with proper content, with podcasts. And it's helped. I mean, not only with investors, but also the younger generation of people coming into the workforce. It's happened many times. I've been called from anywhere, walking downtown, say, hey, you're Rosefellow. I love what you guys are doing. It's giving me the push to go off and do something different. So it's not only about garnering business. It's also trying to help people who have that idea to maybe do something different and do something unique. That hey, we can do it. Anybody can.
Funny enough, I got actually spotted in Greece. It was the weirdest thing. Like I was like in Athens, just walking, and someone was like, "Hey, you're from Rosefellow." I was like, it was quite a little bit of a shock.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, I agree. I think the issue associated with all of this, and I go back to what I said earlier, is a sense of sincerity, right? It's, if you're going to be doing what you're going to do, if you're not going to put your heart into it, if you're not going to put the passion into it, who am I to sit here and say that I watch successful entrepreneurs who are passionate and execute if I'm not a person that can do that? Right? Otherwise, it's textbook.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, and it's hard to believe. It's hard to run, and I think that's where the successful brand awareness comes in, is that ability to sell who you are with that utter sincerity that is not marketed, if you will.
Yeah.
So looking ahead, the future, 2025, beyond, do you see any new trends emerging that will define entrepreneurs as opposed to what we've seen in the past?
I think we're going to see a lot more of the whole discussion on risk tolerance at the next little while and see where that opportunity rises. I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the market right now. I think there's a lot of fear coming out of the election south of us, and tariffs and trade and border patrol and everything that comes with it. I think it's an opportunity. I fully believe that's there. I mean, it's a question of whether you can adapt and do what you need to do. Do I think we're going to see new characteristics? I don't think so. I think, the characteristics that have been successful entrepreneurs have been around for hundreds of years. It's not something that we can wake up one day and be arrogant enough to think that we invented passion or execution. I think it's how we go about doing it. I think it's how we address ourselves in the market. I think it's how we address ourselves to our people. At the end of the day, there was, execution, which literally was execution, right? And now there's, how do you get it done properly and keep your team going? I think we're going to battle against a lot of negativity over the next little while that we're seeing in the market. But I think there's still a lot of strength in there, and there's a lot of opportunity, and it all comes, it's the half glass full, half glass empty, And Sam, it's interesting because you mentioned the introvert as well. If you get me outside of the business world, I've suffered anxiety and depression for a large part of my life, and I go into that mode personally. You won't see me in that mode professionally.
Yeah.
It's not conducive to the people around me. There's people that count on me. There's people that require to see the leadership. I mean, I used to joke when I was leading Fuller. I used to have a retired partner who would walk into my office, and every morning I'm in the office at 7. Every morning, 7:15, 7:20, he knocked on my door and he said to me, you got it under control. Got it under control. And this went on probably for 2 years. And finally one day he knocks on the door and he says, you got it under control? And I said, Ted, does it matter? And he looked at me, and I said, all that matters is you think I have it under control. And so long as the rest of the team feels that's what it is as a leader, that's part of it. What's going on in my head and the voices in my head are almost irrelevant to the rest of the world.
Well, what's the saying? Perception is reality.
100%. And let's face it, most of the people that are not entrepreneurs are looking to somebody to set the tempo for the way they see things and the way they live and the way they address a daily grind. And if you're coming across negative, then it's going to permeate its way through your organization.
That's interesting what you said, Mike, because it's a tough characteristic to have as an entrepreneur. I think we've all been in that situation where there's so much going on between the ears, so much stress, and you have that employee that comes by your office. Hey, how you doing? Good morning. And you got to put on that smile and can't let them feel the stress. And for myself, it comes to even going home. when you see your wife or your kids. Hey, Dad, how was your day? Great. Yeah, we just risked $10 million. We're not
right.
sure if we're going to flop.
I'm not going to sleep tonight, but hey,
Yeah.
you can go to bed knowing it's all good.
It is tough. What would you say is your way of dealing with that personally? I mean,
I'm medicated. Actually, I am, but that's beside the point. No, like I said, I've had all my life I've battled anxiety and depression and OCD, which means the thoughts never seem to go away. I think you spend a lot of time trying to understand yourself. I remember as I was taking over, I took over at Fuller at 36. So I was, I had partners that were almost twice my age at that time that I had to ask, or tell them to go home because it was retirement time. So you learn stuff quick.
Yeah.
But I do remember going through a severe period of introspection. Trying to understand psychology associated with the mind and why we do things and why other people do things. And a lot of times I go back into that understanding of why am I feeling this way? Am I feeling this way because it's me, or it's chemical, for lack of a better term? That's my shit. It's not somebody else's problem, and I need to deal with that. And if I'm feeling this way because I think we're going bankrupt, well, I still have to deal with that a certain way so that, not everybody thinks the ship is... It very much, it's huge self-awareness campaign. And I think that's really, if you were to ask me what it is, it's that managing myself that took a long time to recognize that no matter how I felt, you had to do what you had to do for the best of your team.
Something that became really important to us in the last 2 years was giving back, paying it forward. 3 years. You're right. And it's not because we didn't think it was of importance at the on stages of Rosefellow. It's just we were so wrapped up around growing the company, getting it, building a proper infrastructure. And when we finally came to a point where we had that infrastructure, we could take a step back and look at the bigger picture. We looked at, okay, what can we do? What can we do for others? How can we pay it forward? Do you notice that with entrepreneurs? Or do you see them kind of wrapped up in their own business and they don't take the time to do so and they forget how they got to where they were?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't necessarily build in a social mission to their businesses because of time, busy, they're trying to survive. I get it. So no judgment there. But I think if you do have the spare cash flow, if you do have the spare resources, there are a lot of creative ways that you can get involved. There is strict donation. Just give cash if you can. That's a great way. You can deliver manpower, and there has a certain marketing value if you really want to be cynical about it. If you really want to be compartmentalized, make it a marketing activity. Go to the food bank and go wrap Christmas presents. Anything, really. But do be focused about what your outreach is. Mike, you can talk about the dragon boat races and your work for that for so many years, but it's that consistency over many years, I think, that helped FL Fuller Landau build up their brand, and that can create value for, again, being very cold and cynical. Good works are a part of the brand. It's a part of marketing. It's all wrapped up in one big bundle. And if you don't want to do it because you're not compelled to do the right thing, do it because it might increase your marketing value and the value of your brand.
Yeah, I agree, Dan. I think you look at this and you say, but part of it is the person that you are, right? So some people get it, some more than others. Part of it is teaching the next generation that's part of what you're doing, and whether that's the kids learning to do a project in high school, or whether it's young professionals coming in. But the one thing I will tell a young professional who wants to get involved is don't get involved in anything that you don't believe in or that you don't want to be part of, because there's nothing worse than showing up for the sake of showing up and not being actively involved in what you're doing. Having said that, I will agree, Dan, and this will be not a popular statement, but I don't think there's anything truly... I don't think anybody is purely philanthropic, okay? And maybe Mother Teresa. I'm looking around this room, guys. I'm not seeing Mother Teresa sitting in here. So yes, okay, Sam. Maybe it's not the ink. It's the hat. And the reality is there's always an element to it of marketing or personal satisfaction or ego. You know what? So what? At the end of the day, you're there to help other people. If you can give back and you can contribute, and you will see that if it starts at the top, you have a culture of giving back the entire organization. And Dragon Boat's a perfect example. I mean, we've been involved with that 16 or 17 years now. One of our commitments initially, because we weren't sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars to market, is we took a title sponsor to the Dragon Boat event. And we committed to put in at least 2 boats, which was 22 people each. And we had an event where our team showed up the Friday before the event, and they helped set up, they helped participate. The day of the event, everybody, it became an office-wide endeavor. They brought friends, they brought families, and all of a sudden, you've got this sense of, camaraderie and community, but you're also giving back at the same time, and you're teaching a younger generation that this is just what you do, and there's a lot of that lacking.
Yeah.
I'd go even further. We have a lot of intergenerational debates about, the difference between millennials, Gen Zs, and older. Gen X, boomers, entrepreneurs, maybe there's no expectation of a social mission there, but for millennials and younger, they actually do expect you to have some sort of social mission. It has to be built into your business. It has to be clearly defined on an area of your website. There has to be a project involved there. Even if it's a straight up donation, we'll give a second pair of shoes to a needy person, something like that. The expectation is there, and it almost borderline seems unacceptable to many young people if there's not a social mission in the business.
Well, it's a differentiator, right? At the end of the day, and if you're looking to be different, and I've tried to explain this to accountants for years. I mean, you get to a certain point in your career, you're no better, you're no worse than anybody else in the city. Like, you know what I mean? You get to a certain point in time, you should be able to have a certain skill set that should be transferable if I'm with firm A or with firm B or with firm C. What differentiates you? What differentiates you is the person, is the relationship build, it's the community, it's the way you treat your team, it's the way you deal with your clients, because there's got to be something that makes us, in a world of, 8 billion people or whatever that number is, what's going to make you stand out? And in today's world, it can't just be a billboard or an advertisement. Nobody believes in that anymore.
Exactly. I know that we do a monthly kind of, we'll call it a brainstorming session with everybody within our company, and we give everyone the opportunity to make a suggestion or ask a question. And in our last one, one of our development coordinators, he said, it'd be fun to do an event before Christmas for underprivileged kids. And he goes, but not just make a donation. We should do it as a team on a weekend together. And within 3 weeks, we put something together where we did it at Summit School for autistic and underprivileged kids. And everyone from the company was there. It was nice to see on a Sunday. It wasn't forced upon anyone. It says you're open to come and enjoy. And everybody wanted to put on the volunteer T-shirt and help out. It was nice because the smiles were genuine.
The camaraderie
as well. It
was unbelievable. Didn't expect that.
It's maybe selfish to say, but that's what I enjoy. It's incredible. The feeling you get it's way beyond winning a deal or getting a new tenant in a building. It's really special to do the right thing.
Do you guys interact with the word YIMBY ever?
No.
Heard of it? Yeah, I've heard it.
So YIMBY stands for Yes in My Backyard.
Yes.
So I'm a proud YIMBY, and I've gone on the radio in Montreal many, many times over the years saying that, yes, we do have to build up in Montreal. It's incredibly important for the future of our economy. To my knowledge, I'm one of the only mainstream political commentators in Quebec that still to this day is against the idea that we can't build anything taller than Mount Royal in Montreal. Okay. Now, there's this very silly rule. A lot of people don't know about it, but you guys know.
Yes.
You cannot build anything taller than the mountain anywhere. And I understand if it's right up against the mountain, in the neighborhood of the mountain, fine. You don't want to block a view or whatnot, but you can't build it anywhere. And that is, to me, a form of soft corruption, because what it does is it restricts the market, as you know. It brings up the prices of virtually everything. It puts people into desperate situations with rising rents downtown faster than we can accommodate in Montreal. It is a form of not only soft corruption, but incompetence, and it's hindering the growth of our city.
It makes absolutely no sense. We want to be a world-class city, yet we can't have buildings taller than X. It makes no sense.
But I mean, perfect example of this was Ferrera Restaurant.
Yeah.
Right? We had this conversation. We had the whole F1, what was it? Was it called?
Terrace Gate.
Terrace Gate. I was going to call it Sidewalk Gate, but I guess I'd get in trouble for that. So Terrace Gate. And she went through the exercise of calling the city in. The city gave her specs. They came back. They said, no, move it a little bit. She set up the patio during F1, and then few days before, a different department of the government comes in and says no, and shuts it down. You say, we're living in a world, in my opinion, that is totally procedurally driven and not about customer service or logic, or it's all about somebody hiding behind a list that says, here's the list, and you can't do that. And the whole time she's talking and telling us this story, which obviously we were all familiar with, but as she got into it deeper and deeper, all I can think is, what does everybody who comes to Montreal during F1 go home thinking about? They go home either having lived the shutdown or having read it somewhere, going, well, you know what, this used to be the greatest nightlife, and I don't want to call it necessarily party city, but social city in North America. All right, now we're third in Canada.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you gotta believe that politically, that drive behind doing illogical things is the reason we continue to lose ground.
What upset me with that whole weekend is, those dates are set at the very least a year in advance. Can you not plan a little better to make the most important roads downtown accessible? Put those orange cones to the side. Figure out a way to plan 6 months at a time. It's okay. We need the roads to be open for that date. Do what you need to do. Just make it accessible for all the tourists coming into town. I was in, I think it was in New York, and I was at a dinner, and somebody said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Montreal." I said, "Oh, Orange Cone City," was the comment.
Yeah, the snow melts and orange cones grow. That's what happens in the spring.
It's sad.
Wasn't an international singer supposed to appear somewhere downtown, and because of the traffic, I think an hour and a half, they decided not to even. Yep. They canceled the show.
It's
during
sad.
the F1. I'm actually, maybe this is slightly controversial. I think Montreal will eventually lose the F1 because of all of this.
I agree.
I mean, it made sense in the past when we were the only North American city that had it. The drivers liked coming here. If I'm not mistaken, F1 needed the automotive presence here. But now with a U.S. conglomerate having bought them, there's Miami, there's Vegas, Houston, if I'm not mistaken.
But you don't think our bike paths that are taking over the city are essentially going to attract people back here?
It's quite funny, actually. We go to Florida pretty often. And Florida is a city a state that can actually accommodate bikes. They don't have that many bike lanes comparative to what we have here.
No, 100%.
It's a funny thing to watch.
I like bike lanes, just not so many of them, maybe.
I'm not against bike lanes, but I have a problem with them going both ways on one of the busiest north-south streets in the city.
Closing down St. Catherine, which is in the plans as well, to me is really, really unwise and far too early. Like that's a top-level city, and that's a worldwide. That's like one of the biggest cities in the world would close down their downtown core like that. We're not there yet, and thinking that we're there yet can be really dangerous to our economy.
Yep.
Agreed. How about the controversies?
Sure.
I'll let you get into that.
Which one do you like better?
You pick.
Well, Pastagate was a lot about entrepreneurship to me. Pastagate, the name came from Leslie Chesterman, the food critic at the Gazette, but it was my blog that reported it first. This was the case of the OQLF, the language inspectors, as we call them here in Quebec. They went to Buena Notte, a popular supper club. Now, it was Buena Notte, as we know, located on Saint Laurent, which is very symbolic in Montreal. It's the traditional divide between English and French. It's not a real divide. There's no division. But it's that symbolic division. It's an institution. It's tricultural, which was a big part of the scandal, too. So what I said about Pastagate was that first of all, it's the instinct to be against an entrepreneur and to give them a hard time for having the word pasta on a menu. That's what the conflict was about, is just kind of crazy. And to also to not appreciate that this is a local institution, a tricultural institution, and that this would eventually blow up and be a news story, to me is unfortunate. So I didn't want to embarrass Quebec, but Quebec and the agency embarrassed itself by going after people for one-word violations in some cases. So it made the news internationally, and then the OQLF, to their credit, implemented a system that they kind of laid off businesses for a while, especially small businesses. They did ease up. And that lasted for a while. It lasted for the better part of a decade until Quebec's Bill 96 came in, which was the tougher language legislation. So that was one controversy. I'm not sure it was very productive for very long, but it at least sent a message that free speech is alive and well in Quebec, and everyone agrees with that across the board. Even the most hardline nationalists thought Pastagate was over the top. So there has to be limits on this sort of inspector culture in Quebec.
Agreed.
My take on it comes from a different angle, from the business side of it. Is we live in a world where doing business is getting more and more complicated, heavier and heavier, and whether that is bringing more professionals in to help, and it's onerous. And one of the first things I learned when I started to get into customer service is, how do you make a customer or a client life easier to do business with you, not harder, right? And when I think of bringing business to the city, when I think of coming to Quebec, and this is not a language issue, it is a bureaucracy issue. And the more difficult it is, the quicker they're going to go somewhere else. And whether that is another province or whether that's another country, we are basically shooting ourselves in the foot by trying to be overly procedural in the world that we live in, at the expense of entrepreneurship, at the expense of doing business with people, and, as we talked about, at the expense of tourism at the end of the day.
Absolutely. All right. Key takeaways. We're very thankful to have you both with us, Dan and Mike, and it's nice to hear some of the commonalities that we've heard with some of the previous entrepreneurs you've met with, risk takers. I think we did one of those.
Yep.
What are some of the takeaways that you have from many of these interviews you've done with people? If one word comes to mind, what would that word be?
Love or passion that Mike mentioned as well. There's that cliche, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. We've had probably over a dozen entrepreneurs say that was their main piece of advice to inspire others. So I think having love, which is passion, which is drive and focus, it's also somewhat irrational and very emotional. So it's a mix of those sort of groupings of emotions, I would say. Love and passion.
Execution, getting it done. The old Nike commercial, what is life isn't a spectator sport? You can't run a business if you're not going to make a decision. And equally important to making the decision is correcting the decision. Like, don't try and ram a square peg in a round hole if you made a wrong call. Make a wrong call, fix it, and move forward. The team just looks at it and goes, hey, you know what? It's okay to make a mistake because we can fix this and move forward.
I like that, because so many people come up with incredible ideas, but they don't move forward on it. You got to execute.
I live with CPAs. Tell me about it.
Any parting advice or thoughts for our listeners? Mike, Dan?
We're heading into different times. And I think as Canadian entrepreneurs, we all should have a responsibility to innovate and to accelerate. Online, there's the CAN-AC movement, if you will, Canadian accelerationism. I think everyone, no matter what you do down the line, it could be even the most basic business, figure out ways to accelerate and to innovate, because at a certain point, we may have to fight as entrepreneurs in ways that we haven't before in previous decades. And let's be prepared to innovate and to innovate in a way that's competitive with our neighbors to the south, crucially.
To me, it goes back to the execution side, but it is like, how do we go back to customer service? How do we go back to treating people, the way they deserve to be treated, not because it sits on a list under my desk or next to the cash register or whatever it is. I mean, we should be helping people. We should be finding a way to get things done. And I'm just tired of everybody, hiding behind a list or behind a procedure that somebody wrote somewhere. I have a big problem with that. And I think that's going to continue to be a differentiator amongst ourselves, within our markets, and anywhere else. If you can get people to your store, you can get people to your office, you can get people to your building, and you can make life easier for them, man, I think there's an awful lot of people out there willing to pay a premium for that right now.
Mike, I love that, because I find that everyone's hiding behind Zoom and team calls today. That personal meeting, we love that, and we've been pushing that. We will fly anywhere in the world to meet a client as opposed to sitting on a Teams. It's easy. Don't get me wrong. I can set up a Teams invite with Sam, and we can be speaking to someone in England in 5 minutes. But when we take the time and we call the client and say, we're flying to you, we need a half an hour of your time, the reaction, the reception we get is incredible.
I'll give you an extreme. So when Fuller Landau joined BDO, I was the chairman of our international group at that time. It was about a $3.5 billion conglomerate of firms around the world. And I needed to advise. I was still chairman. I needed to advise that we were leaving, and there was a conference in Sydney. And I basically spent 2.5 days on the ground in Sydney so that I could face-to-face tell people that we were leaving. I figured that was the very least that I can do. Now, that's an extreme case, but it does very much. I mean, I'll be on a Teams call, and I will call people out and go, put your camera on. Well, I'm not. You know what? Then maybe get dressed in the morning. Like, there's nothing I hate worse than talking to a wall at the end of the day when I know I got my camera on and they're watching me, but I can't watch them.
Exactly.
It's disrespectful.
I agree. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for listening in. Please subscribe, share the episode, and keep on following Rosefellow on social media. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, Mike and Dan, for the time. We greatly appreciate the advice. And ladies and gentlemen, please tune in to Mike and Dan's podcast. Can you tell us a little bit more about it, Dan?
Yeah, Inspiring Entrepreneurs Canada. You can find it on major podcast platforms. We're not on YouTube yet, but we'll do that in the new year. And every couple of weeks, an inspiring entrepreneur. We have Wealth Simple, Dax De Silva of Lightspeed. You guys are on the show a few weeks ago. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, and we're going to continue into the new year.
I'll definitely be listening. Thank you so much,
Season 16.
Gentlemen. 16. God bless. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.